Welcome to Take a Wander with Shebs. My guest at this point is food and travel blogger Denise Castaneda. Denise, welcome to the show. It's great to have you on. Where are you in the world and how are you as well?
I am currently in my flat in London. I'm doing all right. It's a beautiful day out. I see the sun is shining, so hopefully I can get out in a little bit afterwards. So
We'll come on to why I brought you onto the show today, was to talk about food and travel and about yourself in general, how you fell into it. Before I do so, just want to get the audience to know who you are a little bit. Just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you fell in love with traveling and what your education was geared towards.
So a bit about myself. I'm Denise Castaneda. I am a full-time consultant in my full-time job, but I also am a travel and food content creator, and I have my blog, denisecast.com. A lot of my content is geared towards individuals who want to explore London, the world with a 9 to 5, and a good element of like exploring cultures and travel is through experiences and food. So I grew up Filipino American, first generation. In terms of travel and falling in love with it, my parents are both from the Philippines, and when we were growing up, my dad's very well traveled. My mom, not so much, but she immigrated over. I remember some of the bigger trips that we had would be like going to the East Coast or trying to like go see other places, and also going back to the Philippines as well. And traveling back to the Philippines for me was like learning more about like my family's culture and like
Mm.
getting kind of closer to roots within there. So but from quite a young age, I feel like travel is something I've always wanted. I've always enjoyed. I've always loved exploring the world. Even when I was in high school, I was saving up money because I knew when I was in uni, I wanted to study abroad. Like I just knew that that was something I always wanted to do. So any extra money I had, like I just saved it up and put it away. And yeah, like eventually was able to like get enough money and some scholarships and stuff to be able to do that. So my first trip abroad without my family was to Athens, Crete, and Rome.
And how old were you when you first traveled
I
around?
was how old was I? It was after my first year at uni. So I want to say I was like 19.
I think that's quite young.
Yeah.
But before that, you were saying that you were traveling with your parents, and you said you went to the Philippines quite a few times to learn about the
Yeah.
culture of your
So
background.
my family's from like my mom's family is still in, some of them have moved to the States, like her brother and stuff. My grandma would
Right.
go back and forth. My dad, a lot of my dad's family, like his siblings, his parents were still in the Philippines. So we were quite fortunate. We would go back and like because I know a lot of like Filipino Americans who like don't even go back at all. So like but we there was always such a priority and families like really like family's really big for my family. So like we would go back about I want to say like every 5 or so years. So I've been quite a bit. Still have to explore a lot more. That's something I'm looking forward to, especially post COVID, to like
Hmm.
go back, see my grandma because it's been a while and like actually explore a little bit. Like every time we go, we try to not only just see family, but also tap in seeing like other really cool places. I'd like to see their stages of things that were very meaningful. And because travel has always been really big on like big moments of my life. So like the Philippines is definitely one because that just kind of like that probably shaped how I travel, like very much like how I would go about and like how I travel, my travel personality. That's how that shaped. My trip to like my study abroad trip kind of like gave was a little bit more on like gave me a taste of Europe and really what I wanted to see out of it because Europe was kind of this romanticized place I didn't really know much of, and it was like something that I was so excited to see because I studied a lot of art history and things like that. So it was really really awesome to kind of just see that all in real life and to like kind of feel like a local too when you're studying even though it was a summer study abroad for me like I've to live that little bit of a local life somewhere else gave me a taste for what it was like to potentially move somewhere else. So I think that was kind of a journey, but probably one of my most significant trips was actually it was a tail end on the back of another trip to the Philippines where I was complete and this kind of goes into a bit of like my expat journey and story was I was completely burned out of work for a little bit. A couple months before this trip happened, like I saw I work full time in consulting, so in like business consulting. So in one of our corporate emails, they said, "Oh, we've opened up potential positions to like move abroad, here are some considerations, whatever that might be. And I looked and I said, okay, that's cool. I'm so busy right now. Like, let me just get through all the things I have to get through. I could sort that out. And then basically I knew I was kind of reeling towards burnout and kind of feeling more like, oh, I need to get a new job, or maybe I need to like move cities, because I had grown up in LA, moved to Arizona, came back and came back to LA and did all the things, like had my condo, did all this stuff, but I was just like so unfulfilled. And I thought it was a work thing. So I said, okay, well, maybe I just need to find a new job, whatever that might be. Cut through, like, I get really good, I guess what we call here annual leave. So like paid time off. So I'd saved up all this time off because I basically didn't take it for the year. So I took a month off of leave, all paid time off, and I
This is
spent
in the States you're talking about
States,
here. Yeah.
States. Yeah, I was very lucky for like the comp plan I had. So I took a couple weeks, went to the Philippines, surprised my grandmother for her 80th birthday, explored there a little bit, went to Palau, and like kind of did a little bit of that. And then on the tail end of my trip, I had a layover in Seoul, Korea. So I decided to extend that out, and just that was my first like truly solo trip to a country where like I didn't speak the language. I knew one person there. She had and she didn't even live in Seoul. She was, I think, outside. She was outside the city because she was teaching in English there. So I just was saying, I'm going to be here for about a week. Like, I'll kind of do my own thing, but it'd be great to see you. Like, come over for the week. Like, come show me around a little bit so I don't get too lost, but then we'll figure it out. And firstly, like the temperature was very different to go from like tropics to January in South Korea, which is freezing,
Mm-hmm.
well below levels. But I loved it there. I had such a good time there. I felt completely safe, and I loved exploring there. Both like, when I was able to see my friend, but for the most part I was on my own. So I did tours on my own, and it was interesting to navigate that. And I think off the back of that trip, I just remember there was a moment where I said, like, if I can do this, surely I can move somewhere else. As soon as I came back the week after, I called up my bosses and just like set up meetings with them, just like, hey, like, I think I want to move to London. Difficult, but it was just more so just to move. And then I figured once I was here, I can kind of move into more of the work that I wanted to do, which is a lot more like, it was a lot more working with clients and like improving processes, things like that.
Obviously, you did a bit of soul searching and got to the stage where you said to yourself, right, this is it. I want to move away from home.
Mm-hmm.
And you decided to have those meetings, which is quite courageous. A lot of people listening might not be able to do, because you can talk about it as much as you want, but actually making that leap and
Mm-hmm.
moving away takes a lot of guts. So when you first moved
Mm-hmm.
across to London, what was it like? Now, obviously, you are living here as an
Mm-hmm.
expat. What's it like living here, and how did you fit yourself in with what you do right now, which is talk
Mm-hmm.
about food and travel? So, how did that all fit in?
I guess the first part of your question, in terms of moving in here, like, it was surprisingly easier than what I thought it was going to be. Like, I always expected it to be hard, but I find myself to be very fortunate because I knew less than a handful of people, at least when I was moving over here, and that was actually through work. It just so happened that particularly one individual, one of my really good friends, we met each other through training. He was in a completely different office, and like he was in St. Louis. We met each other in training in Tampa, and just like kept in touch over the years, on and off very lightly, just because you never know when you're gonna like run into people. And I found out that him and his partner had moved in like the year before, like in like May 2016 or something like that. So I messaged him right away and just said like, hey, I just made this decision. I'm coming over next year. So like immediately I had a friend, and he's a social butterfly, life of the party. So he would the first couple weeks in was just like, go over here, go over here. We're going to introduce you to people, meet people. I've really been very grateful that I've found like a group of people who
Mhm.
have similar interests. So from a food and travel blogging perspective, a lot, like what really started off was one of my favorite things to do is photography and taking photos. Like when I was in Korea, I was taking photos, uploading them like very casually and stuff like that. And I kind of like expanded it a little bit more and more to like show off my travels in around Europe. So Yeah, started doing a lot of that on my Instagram, and probably like 2017, 2018, 2019, I launched my blog to kind of add a little bit more because I kept getting questions on like itineraries or like
Mm.
recommendations. So I've been trying to update it. I'm still backlogged, but I'm actively trying to update as much as possible. But yeah, like that's kind of how it all came together. So it really was focused on mainly travel. But when I started doing the blog itineraries, I tried to cover things like things to do, where to eat, where to drink, like where to stay. Um, and yeah, and then in terms of becoming really a lot, it's interesting because I'm still quite with the pandemic and a kind of things um, being what it was. A lot of my content ended up being London based because that's where
Mm.
I was, and I was kind of showing around what life was over here.
2019 is not too long ago. It's got a few years ago, 3 years ago now,
Yeah.
and obviously the pandemic hit in March 2020.
Hmm.
So you're still relatively new in the
Hmm.
sector, and as you just said there, you were stuck in London for a good few, well, a few
Hmm.
months initially. You could have traveled if you wanted to, but it wasn't as
Yeah.
it's like now anyway. Now it's starting, people
Yeah.
are starting to move freely a lot more.
Yeah.
But obviously, your content was based in London, but it's how you present your work and how
Hmm.
you present the blog. And I guess what challenges did you face then whilst you were in London?
In terms of older stuff, I worked with whatever I had beforehand. So it was like older photos, things like that. I think for me, a lot, so like photos are something that kind of lasts a while. So you could always do photos. But after a while, I'll be honest, it didn't feel authentic to be posting travel stuff when like we
Mhm.
were all in lockdown and in a pandemic. So as things started opening up, I started, you know, just focusing more on my content around my favorite places in London or like where I'd be. And I think, the first lockdown was great. We got out of it. I traveled for a little bit. I think it was really pivotal thing where things really took off for me in my content in general. How I've focused to where I am now is probably that second or third lockdown in like what was the end of 2020 into
Yeah.
2021 where we were stuck again because a lot of my content then changed to really be more of like, well, what will I do when I get out of this lockdown? Like, where am I going to eat? Where am I going to go? What are the things I'm going to see? And that was around the time that like TikTok had came up and like short form video was kind of becoming a thing. So I was playing around with that a little bit. And those videos were, you know, mainly like some of the old panorama shots that I would take for my stories coupled in with photos. Like it was very quick, like stuff.
So,
Yeah.
because you've had a little bit of experience traveling beforehand and you weren't necessarily in the sector before you decided to
Mhm.
bring up a blog, would you say you had that advantage because you were already working, you knew what you wanted? Do you think that was a major goal for you becoming recognized over the last couple of years?
A little bit, just because, like, once I caught on that, like well, again, once I caught on that, like, my photos and then, like, people were asking for, like, things like my itineraries and stuff, I was like, "Okay, there's something here." Like, there's something here in which I could take some really great photos, edit them beautifully, like, of beautiful places, and people are interested in, like, where I go and my travels and stuff, and 20 if I go back to 2019 was a year for me. I think I counted to somebody the other day, it was like 18 places. So that's cities, kind
Wow,
like
that's
cities
amazing.
slash countries, whatever. So like and in that expat lifestyle, when you're over here, because it's supposed to be temporary,
Mhm.
I wasn't meant to be staying as long as I did. Like, you know, part of that lifestyle is you're traveling like, at least monthly on weekend trips, trying to see as much as you can, soak up as much of Europe as possible because, um, you
It's
know,
easier as well, isn't it?
it's easy to do. It's well, at the time it was really
Well,
cheap.
it is. At the moment, it is maybe not that cheap.
Yeah, maybe
They're
at the
probably
moment,
trying to.
no, which is why there's a little bit of a there's a little bit of lull in terms of that piece, but like, very cheap, easy to do. And like documenting those travels was always kind of something because it's just like for me, I love document. I like having the memories of like where I've been and like photography was a way of doing it. And like there were slight videos that I did, but I think now I probably do a lot more video content now than I did before. But yeah, I'd say I always kind of I didn't I probably had that realization probably around that 2019 timeframe when I was doing a lot, I was posting a lot and there was a lot of feedback coming, like really positive feedback, people liking my stuff, things like that. That was like, okay, there's something I could do here. And me being consultant, I was like, okay, like, well, how do I go about this? Like, clearly I need to be a little bit more strategic on like, what am I posting? Like, how do I make this as efficient? Because a lot of what I do is like being efficient, helping companies be efficient, you know, trying to keep like tailor down on like how long it takes to do things. So like that's when I started to treat it as a project and say like, all right, these are the goals I need to do. This is what I have to post. This is what I'm going to try to like achieve. And it's like, I think being a project manager and having that kind of skill set's been really helpful because for I think other creatives, like mutual friends of ours as well, like I talk to them about like my process of how I like organize myself and like look at my content on my schedule and things like that. Like it's to them, it's like, oh my gosh, you think so far ahead. I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, if I look at things three months in advance, I can kind of figure out what I'm doing because I already know what my travel plans are. So
Well, you mentioned something there very important. Strategy is really, really important. Have a strategic plan, what your intentions are going to be, what your long-term goal,
mm-hmm.
what you have. All those are really, really important.
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to standing out, really, you haven't left anything unturned. So you've given yourself a chance to get noticed and for people to appreciate your work. And I think that's
Yeah.
where there's a difference between someone who's just getting in, maybe not. And it's the same thing really with work
Mm-hmm.
experience. If you don't have that work experience, it is work at the end of the day.
Yeah.
You gotta put in the hours, put in the effort. And if you're just sort of trying to get by, just do whatever you can and just post little things that people don't realize that the strategy and the intention and the goal, they're all part of becoming successful and become
Yeah.
with this industry. As you may know,
Mm-hmm.
collaboration is really, really important. And collaborating with the right people only comes if they recognize you're doing a good
Mm-hmm.
job.
Yeah.
I could say this myself. The only reason why I've worked with so many people over the last couple of years and quite a few influential people within the sector is because they've recognized that I've put in the work. And I think
Yeah.
they can see that. And I think that's really important that
Mm-hmm.
you have that anyway. And that transferable skills that you've taken from your job
Mm-hmm.
could potentially make you into a full-time blogger, which is something that I assume you're looking to do? Or is it always going to be work and blog at the same time?
In a long story short, and I've talked about this on other podcasts before in terms of like the type of visa that I was on. I'm currently now on the Gen 2 visa, which does give me rightfully to remain. So once I kind of get through that process, like obviously, I think by then my content might change a little bit. Right now, I focus like, you know, there's a little bit on expat lifestyle, things like that, because I could always like move back. But I think, yeah, we'll see. We'll kind of see how that goes on that end. But for now with the job, I also think like for me, the way my content is right now is very focused on, it's geared towards the people with the 9 to 5 versus the people who have like who are the full-time workers, because it is a different kind of like mindset audience and like intention when you're traveling and like in terms of things like planning, whatever that might be. So for now it'll be that, but you know, I'll never say never if
Hmm.
you know things work out the way they will. That like certainly I'm looking. I'd say it's an interesting thing where you say that because I don't think I ever felt that. I think where things turned for me was around 2019 to say like 2018, 2019, I was like, oh, I could take this into something
Hmm.
more than just me just posting something up. And I think end of 2020, early 2021 was when I finally was like, I could actually monetize this and take this further. And like, I see all the travelers who are doing the brand collabs and stuff. And I was like, I can do that. Like I pitch for my job every day. Like I do proposals for my clients. Like it's no different from me treating it. And then like the minute I kind of realized where I treated some of those instances, kind of like how I treat my full-time job,
Yeah.
things really kind of things turned so quickly. And I was really surprised, honestly, at how once you get one thing, immediately you're
It's like a
on.
domino effect.
Yeah, it's like it's a domino effect, and it was a bit overwhelming. And it's interesting to kind of see like how things have turned out in terms of like the invites to a lot of the places and things like that. And I guess that's where I can kind of say too is like last year I experimented a lot more on TikTok and like trying that out. And for whatever reason on TikTok, what blew up was food content. So
Mhm.
my Instagram, my blog have always been travel. It's always been travel related. And like and my blog is very much travel, but my Instagram started becoming more things to do in London. I was like, okay, I need to start transferring that to the blog. Gonna do that. But then the TikTok really kind of blew up on a couple of like food and restaurant stuff, which is fine because one of my favorite things to do in London is go out to eat with friends and
Yeah.
stuff. Like it's an easy thing to like do on weekends. It's a way to explore, find out other neighborhoods and things like that. And people always relate to food, and it was just one of those. I didn't realize there was a niche there for me.
Yeah.
And then very quickly, like things started kind of coming in terms of like when I was whether there were like PR companies coming to me, inviting me to stuff, whether it was me, pitching out to certain hotels and restaurants, because a great angle for me is, but not just the hotels and the hotel rooms, is because I could do both like hotel interior content and then also like food content, whether that's like videos for them, photos for them, whatever that might be. I just it's really interesting to kind of see how that's kind of come together for myself.
Saturated sector within travel. So what makes you different to others then, would you say?
I think it's hard for me to say because I hate to make like I'm not one to be very boastful. I think you and I have talked about this too. Like I'm not one who's like in front of the camera a lot. So I think for me, it's the way I present. It's the way I shoot things. It's the way whether it's a photo, whether it's a food photo, or if it's like a video for TikTok or Reels, and the content and the way I've edited my videos. I'm pretty formulaic now on how I do things because it's very first person point of view. This is what we did, and I tell the story of like, oh, this is where we've tried out. I found out about through here. These are the things that I tried. This is what I think. Is there value for money? Blah blah. Like what I recommend going back. And I think for a place for any kind of creator, and it's a hard thing for I think all of us to get out of that mindset of like we're one of we're one of like hundreds of thousands. Like everyone could be this, but there's always. I think the thing I always have to remember is there are people who truly enjoy seeing my stuff and like want to and like comment, want to see more, and like honestly, there are things where like the other day I think I got a comment and they're just like, oh, it was on something from like a year ago, and it was like showing off like a boat ride trip that I did and like the food I ate on this boat ride trip and stuff in Sicily. They're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to this trip and I was trying to look up things to do. Like, how do I do this? Like, what's the story of how do you even arrange this? Blah, blah. And it was just like, that content was from like over a year ago. So the fact that someone's still finding it and finds it useful, like for me, I think where I get gratification, and this is partly where I do well from consulting's perspective, like my favorite thing is like helping people in generally in the way that I can. So like the fact that people find some of my stuff valuable, like I think I drive a lot more kind of like value from it versus like I try to do pretty aesthetics, but I'm not as like what's the word? I don't know if it's like from a cinematography perspective, it's probably not in the way I could be shooting in that way. But I'd like to think I bring a little bit of authenticity and value in that sense. So
From what I've seen from your work so far, there's a lot of structure to it. And as I said to you already, you've got an intention and you've got a mindset with the goal behind it all. And I can
mhm,
definitely see that. That's possibly why you have stood out and
mhm,
maybe you're different to others. There's a lot, as I said to you, there's a lot of food content out there. I would always say the unique thing about an individual is that person themselves, how they bring their
mhm,
personality towards their content or their work. And one thing you already said there is your storytelling is how you become noticed. And storytelling is the key thing with
mhm,
any artist, really. So I always like to think of people who are on TikTok these days or Instagram or anything that you do creative wise.
mhm,
In some respects, you're an artist. As an artist, they always say if you can relate back to an artist that you've been inspired by, then
mhm,
the work has a lot of volume to it and
mhm,
there's a meaning behind it. And as long as you've got a meaning behind what you're doing,
mhm,
then people relate to it and people can sort of say, oh, you know what, this person, I can resonate with this person's work and
mhm.
with the food that they put out. And as I said to you, it's a saturated market, but there's always enough for everyone.
Yeah, and the way one person's going to shoot something will be different from how somebody else is. It's the same as photography. Like one person will have a like particular look and style and how they're going to like shoot and edit it versus another. So I don't think there's like it's a preferential thing than anything else. I think I'd like to think there's room for everybody, and especially as someone who still feels very new in this space, like I feel quite encouraged in saying that. So,
And you said as well, by the way, that you're not necessarily in front of the camera, and
mhm.
you sort of narrate your work. I've noticed that's one
Yeah,
thing that you do.
I'm a bit camera shy, so even today it took me a little, like, I had to calm my
Okay.
nerves a little bit for that. But obviously, like, I know I've known you for a little bit, so it's quite comfortable. I think as well, like, content's for everybody. Like, I've even in my photography, like, I'll do some photos with me in it and things like that because I learned to do that because that's what did well. But I used to always even like, if you look way back in my old feed, especially my Instagram stuff, it's there'd always be like maybe a photo of me, but like two photos of just like landscapes or whatever it might be. Like, I definitely wanted, the scenery or like whatever it is to kind of speak for itself because you could place yourself there, but really what you want to see is like what's out there,
Hmm.
what the scene is. And for when I started again in my accidental food content creator piece, I kind of took a similar approach of, well, I don't need, like, one, I don't want people seeing me eat. I'm already like uncomfortable in front of a camera. It's just not really me. But where I can get where I can really showcase food, because food's like, and I've always had a really interesting relationship with food. There are times where, and that can go into like so many different things, but for me, food was a is food for me was a gateway to learn about other cultures and like other flavors and things like that. Like I said, I grew up in LA. I was very fortunate to grow up with like a lot of different like in diverse communities, diverse places, and like have access to different types of food that allowed me to learn. That's always been kind of my way to learn about other countries. So I can kind of say, like, when you talk about like cultural travel or even that, like a key part of it is the food that people eat because that's part of their day-to-day lives and how you kind of like understand what the locals are like and things like that. So even in like, although I'm a big restaurant fan, things like that, there's an appreciation, I think, for like not just the fine dining, although I love the fine dining, love taking photos of it because they're always well presented, but even like street food is like something very homey about it. And like,
It's a very significant point that you're making there. Food, you can is very everyone
mhm,
loves to eat, and you can find out about different
mhm,
cultures through food. That's something that I've not even thought about. That's something I've
yeah.
just thought about just then. Actually, hang on, yeah, you're right. Actually, you learn about people's culture
Mhm,
through what they eat, because
mhm.
people sit down and the food that they eat. Yeah, you're right. It's quite a unique thing that, and for you to recognize that, I mean, that's just, yeah, I've never even thought about that. But that, yeah, I'm sure there's people out there who take pictures of the food itself. Do they actually talk about the cultural aspect of why they eat these things, or maybe how they eat? There's certain places in Asia where they eat with their hands, eat with
Mhm.
certain things. So yeah, it actually, you're right. You can find out about someone through food.
And I think like, yeah, growing up as that first gen, like American, like Filipino American, the way I learned about like my heritage and my culture was through the food we ate every day. It was like, we were very much introduced to Western food, but there are times where we'd have like, our traditional foods, and that's kind of how we learn to connect. So I think when I talk about like what's part of like my travel planning and my travel ethos, like, when you follow me, like anyone who knows me, even as a person, like knows when I travel, like one, I'm a really big planner. It's when I'm not, this year has been kind of like the exceptions to the rules because there's just been a lot going on. But for the most part, I try to get a good mix of like history, culture, like good sites, but also like food's an important piece for me because it's, like if I'm traveling someplace, I don't want to eat the same Western food I have like when I'm back home. I want to try out like what they have there. I want to try like
Mm.
there's always been a thing of like trying out what the locals eat. Like street food's always been like a really like I've always loved trying out street food wherever I go. It's very much intrinsically tied to like understanding what cultures and stuff are like. So I've always had that mindset for years. Pretty regularly, once a month, we'll try out new and different Asian places and cuisines and try to compare what they're like, and we try to compare them to what they're like to like, oh, like how our grandmas would make it or things like that. We all like to try to make the most of our travel experience, which I think is great.
What's the biggest difference between living in the States, working there, and living in the UK and being an expat and having Europe, for example, on your
Yeah.
doorstep.
I'll say this. I've always been into travel. I've always been that person. So I'm the person who I was very fortunate that compared to others in the States, like I had a great what they like to call choice, like PTO, choice time off. So basically you didn't have your sick days and holidays rolled into one bucket and you got 20 days a year. I would hoard those as much as possible to take minimum 3 weeks off and go somewhere, whether it's with family or whatever that might be. So like one year I took 3 weeks off. Where did I go? Well, I know one year I went to Europe with my family. It was my parents' wedding anniversary. It was a significant one, so we actually went. We did a lot of Italy, so I got to go back there and like re-experience that with my family, show them what I knew. Went to Paris for the first time and actually went to London. So like I had been to London at least before I had moved over here. Another time another example as when I went to the Philippines, I hoarded all that time off to go. And the reason I was always that person who would try to be outside of the country when I would be on holiday or on vacation because one, like no one will bother me because if they do, they have to pay for my international phone fees, which are very expensive. And if work wants to call me, then they have to pay for that because I'm on vacation. They don't want to pay those charges. Where I think there's definitely a culture over there, particularly if you're a high performing individual career person, like you don't turn off or like you're still checking kind of like emails and stuff on weekends and stuff versus over here. I think what I've loved about living in, London, continental Europe, is there is definitely a better. There's people still work hard, but there's definitely a better balance in terms of like turning off. It's allowed me to learn how to make better boundaries of that, where I wasn't always good at that before, and was very easy for me to burn out a lot. And it's not saying I still don't burn out, but I'm still like I'm trying to I think it's kind of really helped me in that sense too, because it's an interesting because I posted a very random TikTok the other day because it came up in a conversation. It's like one of the very times I'm in front of the camera is usually on my TikTok because I will be like a little bit more casual on there. And one thing I did notice is that I was talking to a client of mine who is also an American expat, and we were talking about how sometimes in conversation, when you're meeting people for the first time, like one of the first things that, like when you're here, like things I always talk about is like, oh, where'd you go on holiday recently? Like, oh, I feel like if you're a sports fan, like what's your sports thing? Or what? In the US, it's kind of similar thing. They'll talk about sports. One of the defining things is like, what do you do for a living? So it's not about like your hobbies or anything like that. It's more about that. And there was a lot of discourse in my comments over that. That people were like, oh, it's so rude, or like, or I'd be, and I'm just like, look, like all I'm highlighting is that there's a cultural difference there. Like, obviously I prefer this one now because this is where I live, and like
Mm-hmm.
I recognize that. But I think for others, like they don't realize if that's your day to day, like you don't even realize that that's kind of
Of
like
course. Well, it
different.
sounds,
So,
what I was going to say to you, it sounds like you've got a bit of a work-life balance,
mhm,
and you're able to enjoy your
mhm,
work as much as possible and switch off when you can. And
mhm,
that's, I think, really important, really, really key
mhm.
to growing really as an individual.
But I will say, like, putting the time and the effort, there was a time where I was just like, I don't even know if this is going to turn into something. And like I said, things turned around very quickly for
Like,
me, and I just didn't realize it.
we all go through that for those phases actually, where what you do and you think, is it working? Is it going to work?
Mhm,
Why am I doing this? And trust me, at the end of the day, it will pay off if you put the time and effort into it, and
mhm,
and the work is quality. People will eventually notice,
mhm,
and you've got a portfolio of work. Then you see, so people when they look back and go, "Oh, hang on a second, there's a consistency of
mhm,
the work, and you can tell the growth." And
mhm.
you, as I said to you, you can't become a overnight success without
Yeah.
actually putting the work in, especially within this sector, because I kind of treat it as well, I'm sure you do as well. It's
Mhm,
your own media platform where
mhm,
you're, in some respects, in competition with all the others. And
mhm,
well, I say competition, but also in a good way. It's a healthy competition where
mhm,
you're helping one another. And this is where what I was talking about,
mhm,
collaborating is really, really important. And as social media grows, you said that a few years ago, social media wasn't as as prominent in our lives as it is right now, especially since the pandemic started. It's become even more and more prominent.
Yeah.
But it will change things, and blogs will change. Everything that I've heard from you so far is you've done the smart thing is always to keep your main job, and then if it succeeds, you can then go full time with your other stuff.
Yeah.
A lot of people make the mistake of actually quitting the job. They think this is going to be the full time thing, and then
Mhm.
start needing to borrow money or needing to
Yeah.
find ways to live. And it's always important to keep that balance work. So for the first few years, I would always say you
Mhm.
work hard, maybe long hours, 10, 12, 14, 15
Mhm.
hours, but the short term
Mhm.
hard work will pay off in the long term. That's the way
Yeah.
I think.
It's very easy for me as an individual. Again, like I'm a project person. I love to like fall into a project, but again, where I talk about work life balance too. Now my blog and my platforms are like almost like a mini job too. So like for me, like
Of
I'm
course.
trying to carve out time. It's very easy to say I want to be, and it's very easy for me to say like I picked up other platforms. It's like I've started putting things on YouTube Shorts as just like an experiment, seeing how that goes. I'm still trying to like figure out my blog and what's going to work best for that a little bit more, because there's always work to do on the back end, and people don't even realize how much time you can go into like optimizing your website itself just so it's like easily searchable. Like there's so much time and stuff spent in on that. So I think my advice is like pick try not to do everything at once. Pick one platform, get good at it, and then find ways to add in more, and then optimize where you can, streamline where you can. And it sounds very like consultancy and things like that, but like once you kind of find the ways to be more efficient, so you're not spending, you want to be able at the end of the day too to like have time for your friends and family, and to like for me like I don't want every holiday I'm on that I'm that one time with my mom was the exception, but it was because it was a collab, whatever it might be. But you know I try to be a little bit more like have longer lead times on my deadlines for that, so that way I have time to actually enjoy while I'm there. It's not feeling like I just have to go and run around. Like I'll still get the content, but it doesn't feel like pressure because you're still enjoying. So I think if you're somebody who's trying to get into this space, whether that's blog, whether that's TikTok, whether that's like photography, that might be, just make sure that be smart about it, be strategic, but also make sure that you're still enjoying it. Because I have seen where some people are completely burnt out on it after a while, and it is sad to see, because it's like that's something that you love so much. And I think everyone kind of goes through that kind of burnout, and the creator burnout is real. So while we talk about work burnout, like that can also be a burnout. So just make sure that you're trying to find ways to manage your time accordingly. And
Well, Denise, I want to wish you the best of luck with the blog. And your work as a full time. Just before I let you go, can you tell people where they can find you?
sure. So you can find me on my Instagram and TikTok. It's Denise Cast. Also, my website is denisecast.com. I also have a YouTube channel as well, mainly where I upload shorts for now, but have it in the back burner if that's a platform that eventually I want to add to. But it's something I'm holding back for a little bit, but it's there. It needs to be there.
Well, Denise, thank you so much for coming on the show. Really appreciate it. And hopefully we'll get to see each other very soon and catch up on travel. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and hit the bell button to never miss an episode. And follow me on all of my social media platforms. That's it for Take a Wander with Shebs. Hope to see you all soon. Until next time, bye for now.